presentation. Thank you.
We're buffering. Y'all can see it.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you able to do like a full screen
Let me
version of this?
see.
Yeah.
May take me back.
Okay, if not, it's fine. Just we have some images that might be better to see on the full screen.
It just, well, there we go. There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll go first. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here in this second session of our webinar series on, what are oral histories and how do we do them? Am I muted? Oh, no, I'm not. Okay, cool. I do make that mistake a lot. So just to introduce myself for anybody that was here last time or for anybody that this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. So my name is George Harb. I'm one of the community historians at the Arab American National Museum. I have a bachelor's in international relations and I have a minor in Arabic with a focus in Middle Eastern studies. I've been at the museum for about 2 years, almost 2.5 years, and I focus on the expansion of the museum's oral history program, on top of transcribing them, as well as, connecting with other Arab American institutions like Elmahaba Center. I actually met Lydia at one of these connecting events, so that's how I met her, and I'm really great that we made this happen. Now, Shada, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, George. And yes, thank you everyone for joining today's discussion. We're so happy to be here in collaboration with Elmahaba Center. And yeah, my name is Shada Najim. I am a community historian at the Arab American National Museum. I am based in Dearborn, Michigan. So I collect oral histories, I process oral histories, and mostly in that region, Dearborn, but also do more national work. My background is in anthropology, so a lot of qualitative method research and preservation background. And yeah, and George kind of covered it. We do the same thing, just I'm local, he's remote. And yeah, a little bit about the museum if you're not familiar with it. Oh, sorry. The museum opened in 2005, and it is the only museum dedicated to telling the Arab American story in the world, definitely US, but in the world, I believe. And we do have a relatively large oral history collection that is available to the public. We have like over 400 oral histories, and we're continuing to add. So every year, George and I collect oral histories from the community, and we expand that collection. So yeah, that's me.
How many did we collect last year? Like 70 something, 80 something?
Yeah, around like 80 or so. Okay. And so I just want to talk about the process of doing an oral history, just kind of break it down a little bit for you guys. And the title I think is gone, but basically we're talking, yeah, thank you. I don't know why it does that. Yeah, so referencing Martha J. Ross, she's a well-known oral historian, and she was the president and founder member of the Oral History Association. And yeah, so she kind of broke down the process of interviewing and found this material from the Smithsonian Institute archives. And yeah, so the first one is research. And it's very important to research the person that you're wanting to interview or the group of people, or like the family. So definitely do some background check on the person, and just if they're well known, like Google them, or if they published books, read their books or materials. And yeah, so definitely before like approaching the person, do a little bit of research to get to know the person. This will help you customize the questions and the approach that you want to use with this person. Number two is rapport. Obviously, good rapport is established. First thing really is when you like say hello to the person, want to interview them. You need to have some sort of like connection or like a relationship with them, and just get them familiar with your work and get comfortable with them. And this really just helps the process go along smoothly. And three is restraint, and this one is mostly like referring to the interviewer's skill set. And just I would say this one is more like applying the skills as a oral historian or interviewer to this whole process, and just going back to like making sure that you're knowing what equipment to use, knowing the questions that you want to be asking, and being giving space like for open-ended questions, and yeah, like listening without interruptions. So yes. Next, please. And George, did you want to?
Awesome. So the last three R's, I'm gonna read them to you, and then I'm gonna describe what each of them means. So retreat. So what it says is it's you close each interview session by asking a deflationary question, and I'll explain what that means. Such as an assessment of the experiences just discussed. All sessions should be planned and scheduled so that they conclude before the interview becomes fatigue. So retreat. When you think of the word retreat, it sounds like a military tactic. That means like just before you're about to lose, you pull back. So in this sense, when you're doing an oral history, and to really make sure that you do have an effective oral history and that you are getting the information that you need, and um, you're asking good questions and you're getting good feedback, eventually that person is going to get tired. So you want to make sure that you end it on that note at a good point. So what a deflationary question is, meaning like, I'll give you the example. So like, say somebody talks about their life experiences, right? They'll say like, I did X, Y, Z. So then you'll just be like, oh, well, can you sum up X, Y, Z? What did that mean for you? What did you learn from all of those experiences? That's a deflationary question. So then you'll get a deflationary answer, which is like a good ending point for that oral history, if you guys kind of get the gist. And if you have any questions later, we can definitely answer that. So the reviewing part, interviewers should listen to their interviews soon afterwards to analyze their interviewing techniques and to pick up details to follow up on subsequent sessions. So what that means is for each oral history that you do, you're always going to learn something that you didn't do for the last one or the time before. So Shada and I, for example, like we're pretty seasoned. We've been doing this for a couple of years, but there's always things that we look back on that we might have done. It's like, oh, maybe I should have asked this, or maybe I should have asked this particular question. So another aspect is like look at their body language, right? Look at the body language of the person doing the answering of the questions. Like really read into them, see what kind of questions work, what approaches work, and what works and what doesn't work. So that's kind of what that means. And respect, obviously, I don't have to really explain what respect is. It underlies every aspect of the oral histories. You're going to want to maintain that respect and composure during this entire 6-hour process. When you approach them, they want to do an oral history, great. They don't want to do one, that's fine. You just want to make sure that throughout the retreat, the beginning R's, which they were research and rapport and restraint. So like when you're researching them, make sure you're being ethical about it. When you're restraining, make sure you're doing okay. And then while you're doing the interview, make sure you're not going out of bounds and things like that. And then even when you're transcribing the interview, make sure you're doing your duty as even if it's Shada and I as oral historians, or if it's just interviewing your grandma, just make sure she's getting the respect that she deserves. In the aspect that you're not changing really what she says, or you're kind of following the grammar that she uses and things like that.
Yeah, and I also just want to add, in terms of respect, also respecting the interviewee after the interview is done. So like George mentioned, with the transcribing, if something was written down that like was like misunderstood, or like there was an issue with that and the interviewee notices it or wants to make any like edits, make sure to go back and you're fixing and applying what they want to do and edit. So just like it's a continuous process, and Also, like just maintaining that relationship afterwards with the interviewees also falls under respect, and keeping connection with the individual. So, okay, and so a little bit about structuring oral history interviews. So at the museum, George and I, we often use like a semi-structured format and or really more conversational, casual interviewing methods. And we just find that it works best for the Arab American community that we often interview. So in terms of like semi-structured, it basically means I would provide the interviewee with like a guide of questions, interview questions, and then kind of just let them review it or like look at it during the interview or even before and just like kind of answer or like choose the key points that they want to focus on. But also like a lot of I do that and some people like just choose not to use the the guide at all. And I'm like, okay, like they have something in their mind that they just want to talk about and elaborate on, and I'm like, that's great, we want to hear it. So this is where like this is why this format works best for us, and we do recommend it for other interviews, especially with like families. I can't I really can't imagine how well a formal structured interview would go if you're like interviewing your grandma or like your cousin. But I guess you can try if you need to. I've done like more structured formal interviews with it was in 2022 I interviewed I don't know if I can say the name, but anyways, a business owner, like a very well-known business owner, that was has created like quite establishment for himself. And so anyways, the interview was a bit more structured because it was also video recorded and it was going to be used for like a social media campaign and it was going to be applied to these different, projects. So we had like specific content that we were looking for. So during that, it made sense. But really, otherwise, I can't really think of many other instances that we just use like formally structured interviews. Um, it just feels a little robotic, to be honest. Also, like you want your interview to flow and be enjoyable for others to like listen to and watch. So yeah, preference for us, George and I guess. Um, and yeah, I just want to emphasize questioning. The question guide can definitely be personalized and should be personalized, depending on who you're talking to and what group you're talking to. So I definitely recommend doing that after you've done like your research portion. Just go back to your question list. It can be like adding on or removing some questions. You can have like a set of basic ones. And I believe I shared the question guide last session if you attended. I don't know if Lydia, if you shared it out with the presentation. Okay.
I shared the presentation, but I don't think was it in there?
No, I sent it like in the chat. I don't know if
Oh
I
no.
can reshare it after
We'll
we
do it
leave.
this time. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. But yeah, we have like a standard one that we use, and I'm happy to share that with anyone who's looking to do, oral history project for themselves or their family. But yeah, I would just again, don't rely too much on the structure. Just kind of lead with like an open discussion and leave room for like serendipitous moments and spontaneous details. That those are the details that make a really good oral history, in my opinion. So yeah, that's what we recommend.
Yeah, and then one thing I want to add before we kind of move to the next slide. Actually, you can move to the next slide. It won't really affect anything. But one thing I really want to add to what Shada said is that in the styles that Shada and I interview, and we've collaborated on a few separate interviews together, and it really makes it more natural. Like it feels like a conversation and it doesn't feel like an interrogation. I don't know any Arab American that likes being interrogated, so we also don't want to be a part of that. So we want to make it as natural as possible. And it really does give the person the ability to kind of feel comfortable in our presence, and it allows us to be comfortable in their presence. Like, like we're openly sitting with this person and they're sitting with us. And, it sounds like we're having more of like a heart to heart rather than um, just this like formal interview that we're adding to our collection. So what you can see here is just like a small little quick um, few questions that we might use that Shada sent you guys last time. And I was just talking to Shada about this earlier and I was asking her, I'm like, have you ever used this? And she said, yeah, at the beginning, and I don't think I've ever used this example, or I've never used the questions that we have. Usually we send this out as a guide because when we do oral histories, people will ask us, like, like, what kind of questions do you want to ask us? So what I'll do is I'll send them the list of questions that we have, and I'll say, hey, like, this is just an example of questions that I might ask, but I may not ask them at all. Just because, just like Shada said, we do like that flow. Like we just kind of like to leave it spontaneous. And it's like we kind of like we have the structure of what we want to know, but it's also that we want to know things that they want to tell us. So it's all depending on them. So what you can see, like you can have questions about like, like what is your name? That's a very easy question. Tell me the story of like your family's history, or do you have any traditional first names or anything like that? Like how did you guys get those or anything like that? So what I would say is it's all be with one of those R's, like when you research the person, kind of think about like when you research the person, what kind of questions do you want to know? Like if they're an author, like you want to ask about their books, what's their writing styles? Why do they write this way? If they're a chef, where did they learn their cooking skills from? Did they maybe practice with their grandmother when they were younger or anything like that?
Yeah, I just want to add also, like, we ask a lot of the times about names and like family names in particular. Like, if people tell me stories about like their grandmothers or grandfathers, I ask like what their full names are. And that I think is really useful information to have in an oral history, especially like for us as a museum. Our oral history collection is oftentimes used for genealogy purposes and, for people interested in tracing back their family tree or like, doing research to find out more about their origins. So basically, it's helpful for the family themselves to keep that record of names, but also for others that want to connect with that region or learn more about, this family, or so I mean, these details are useful, and I think some of whether it's through a question or like naturally asking people, I would definitely add like ask for the year and also just like names. So just some specifics to add in there is just like really rich content that you can add to an oral history. All right. And so yeah, I just want to talk about the different types of recording equipment that we use and well, at the museum, but also like individually that you can use. So very standard stuff that hopefully you can apply to your project or to your personal oral history interviewing process. So yeah, we at the museum we use the test cam audio recorder, which is the one you see. It kind of looks really old school, but it works great. It's the one in the photo at the top, and it's a basic like audio recorder that just has basically like the two things on top are like microphones that is supposed to be for each, like the interviewer and an interviewee. And it just basically records an uncompressed, like preservation quality audio file. Like it's an MP3 file, which really is sometimes all we need for audio interviews is just, the standard equipment like that.
Is that what
Uh,
it's actually for two different speakers? I
yeah.
did not know that.
George,
See,
don't see this in our
guys, I'm learning
presentation.
from this too. I thought it was just for extra sound quality.
You're so funny. Um, that's hilarious. Anyways, you can also like if you're gonna use like a mic, like a lav mic or something, you can also plug it into this. It has that option. And so if you're like in a nosy kind of like loud environment, but you're still wanting to do the interview, you can always plug in your mic into that and it works really great. But yeah, this is what we use, George and I, a lot of times, but we also use if we're on the go, like a smartphone. If you have like an iPhone or Android, a lot of times they have those like voice memo recorder, depending on your phone, like recording app that you can just easily open and do the interview that way. And obviously the quality of the audio is not going to be as uh crisp, like as neat, I guess, but I mean, it is what it is. The content is really what you're trying to capture, right? And if you have to use your phone, then use your phone. Use what you have. We also use laptops. I personally use a MacBook Air, and that has a great just also like a software just for recording audio, and that also works great. Actually, when I'm doing audio interviews, I use both. I do like the recorder, and then just open up my laptop, record that way. in case, God forbid, Smalla, like the interview is corrupted or lost in the audio on one of the devices, then you have a backup. It's good to be a little paranoid when doing these things because, things have happened. So yeah, so we can use those equipments, any of them, really, whatever you have on hand, as long as it does like a good quality, decent quality MP3 recording, you're good to go. And yeah, can be simple.
Yeah, so just to kind of continue what Shayla was talking about, like the different things that we use. Um, One thing that we do want to talk about is like the different ways that you can kind of save them, which we'll actually talk about in another slide too. So when you record it, it's actually preferred that you do put it in an uncompressed preservation quality audio file. So what that means is that, we like to use the format of like an MP3. So an MP3 allows us to actually upload into the system that we actually use to kind of store our oral history interviews, and which allows it to post it. So usually it's preferred MP3 or a WAV audio file. Is it WAV? Did I say that right? WAV. So the other thing that you're going to want to pay attention to, also we forgot to add, so there's MP3 and then there's WAV, but then if it's a video, it's preferred that it's in an MP4 format. And Shada, do you use the .mov format or no?
I prefer not to use that
Right.
one just because it doesn't really apply for various softwares available online, like
Yeah.
especially if you're going to do transcriptions and such with the interview.
Yeah.
Um, it's just it could work for you. It's just not very standard, so I don't really recommend using that one, but up to the person and what they have.
Awesome. So then one thing that you're going to want to pay attention to when you're doing an oral history interview is so even with that recorder that Shada showed you, that recorder will pick up everything. So you want to make sure that you're sitting in an environment where it's, I kind of want to say pin drop quiet, to where if something happened, you can hear it, you can immediately cut it out. I wouldn't recommend doing it in like a public setting, like a coffee shop, or if you're sitting like in an office where there's, phones ringing and things like that, because it'll pick up all of those things. And then if you decide to keep those in the oral history, you'll actually have to add all of those in to the transcript, just because we have to be ethical about it. If you don't have a good mic system, what you can do is, like, say Shada uses her phone. Sometimes we have a mic that we can attach to where it can pick up a little bit extra. When it comes to editing, we kind of like to use iMovie. Just Shada and I both have Apple products, so it's a lot easier for us to edit, and it's pretty much dump proof. It's very easy to edit on there. You can edit the one of the tricks that I like to do is I will edit the video file, which will then convert it into the audio file, so I don't have to edit both. So it'll just do it one, and it's like a 2-for-1. We can also use Adobe Podcast to enhance it. And we can also use iMovie to also enhance the audio or the picture or anything like that. And make sure when you do an oral history and you're in a setting where you're doing it on a video, make sure that there's decent lighting, because that lighting will make a difference. If you're doing it on Zoom, make sure there's no lighting behind you, because it can, or make sure they don't have it. Otherwise, it can kind of blur
Blur.
them. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, and some more suggestions for like storage and the formats that we use at the museum. S- uh Wait, sorry, missed that one. Oh, apologies. I skipped a slide there or two ahead. Yeah, so anyways, formats and storage, and just some more suggestions for oral histories. So we always like I recommend doing like an intro yourself as an interviewer before having your interviewee speak, just so to give like context of where you're at, what's the date, who you're interviewing, who you are, because just metadata that really is very helpful in the long run. So yeah, just begin with an introduction that identifies who's being interviewed, who is conducting the interview, where, when, and the purpose of the interview. And it can be very simple. Like I usually just say like, hello, my name is Shada Najm, blah, blah, blah. I work at the museum, and I say my title. I say where I'm at, and then I say the person's name, where their location, and the date, and then just move on to like the question list or the start the interview. But it's recommended to do that. And yeah, clarity, preservation purposes. And this one, the second point, actually, I struggled with when I first started doing oral histories. And it's basically like letting your interviewee speak without any interruptions and relying on physical cues instead of like speaking, right? So I'm like the type of person that likes to like say yeah or right or uh-huh. But really you have to like kind of be conscious of that, and you have to like call yourself out, and you're like, this is gonna look weird in the transcript and in the recording. So definitely avoid sharing like the verbal feedback, and rely more on like nodding your head, like body language, smiling. And so just so you're not interrupting the interviewee, and so their story's like flowing, and you're just not, yeah, because it can be distracting when someone's just like, yeah, yeah. Um,
It's
anyways, yeah.
all about one of those R's that comes in, which is respect. So you want to make sure that you're giving them the due respect that they have when they're talking. You're not like just like, oh yeah, I know what you're saying. You're just like, yeah, uh-huh, or things like that.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes a lot of times we do it without like realizing. Like I used to do this just because that's how I show someone that I'm paying attention. But like with interviews, really just be conscious of that. Like just be aware of doing it. So it helps a lot. And once you like stop, you just get into this zone and just active listening, right? You're actively listening with your body, with your head, with your heart, and really being there for the person. And it's like an honor for them to sit there and share their story with you. So just really be in the moment, with yourself, but with the person as well. Um, and then the third point is upload the files from the recorder to your computer, external hard drive, and cloud. Yeah, again, emphasis on just backing up your files. Really, you don't want to lose this precious content that you worked so hard to, collect and conduct this interview. Um, and a lot of times, some interviews you're not able to redo, due to like people's age or health conditions or location or whatever life happens to be. So really just be very careful of what you do with the files. And what I recommend is just back it up in many places as you can, in many different places. So if you have it as a file in your computer, in a safe, secure file that's not like a public account or anything, for privacy purposes, just have it in your computer, upload it to a hard drive, like another file, put it in a cloud. Again, use your best judgment on what's like privacy, and what's secure and what's not. But yeah, at least I would say put it in like 2 to 3 different places, this file. Okay. And yeah, and Georgia.
Yeah, so one of the most important things that Shada mentioned is that like to save it. So then a question might come up is how do you save it? So how do you save it in a way that you're going to remember it is so when we usually save a MP3 file or an MP4 file, which is we call it a medium. So when we do the transcription, we actually list like the whole abstract, like the name, who interviewed, how long was the interview, what was the interview about, and what medium was it. So a medium usually means like, was it a video or like an audio file? So what we do is we usually put like the last name, the first name. So I kind of gave you this example of, like my last name first, my first name after, the date of the interview, and which number interview was it and what file did it come from? Because sometimes you can have more than one interview. You can do a couple different sessions. So make sure when you save it, just kind of emphasis like what Shada said, you save it multiple times. Another aspect that we also have is when we do an oral history interview, we do transcribe them as well. So when you transcribe them, it's kind of really hard to transcribe them by hand. That's how they used to do it up until that they had AI software. And some of the ones we use, which is like Otter AI and Reduct AI. So Otter AI is like a kind of like a simple one. It's mainly for interviews that were done in English. And because we are an Arab American institution, we don't always have interviews that are in English or, they're either partially in Arabic or halfway in English or things like that. So that's where we have a system like Reduct, where Reduct can actually translate the Arabic itself and from the different dialects. It'll take it from Fusha and it'll turn Fusha, for anybody that doesn't know, is the formal modern standard Arabic. So that's where that comes in. That's where also you'll put in, you'll add that to the file that you have, and you'll kind of make sure that you mark any like interruption that happened. Like say you didn't have good audio, you had disturbances in the back, you have to put that all in. The last thing, which is kind of what we've been emphasizing multiple times, is make sure you make copies and you save it to some kind of an external hard drive, and or if you have a cloud. Just like for my own personal interviews that I've done with my family, I save them all on what is it called? Dropbox. Just because, like you have big storage, or you can use Dropbox, you can use Google, whatever you feel is safest for you.
Yeah, and just one more note about the transcription software. We do rely on using AI just because we have like a large volume of interviews that we're doing every year, and it's just not possible for us to do manual transcriptions. So yeah, just using AI, it's a great tool. It's very much makes your life as an oral historian or interviewer easier, but it doesn't come without like errors, right? So obviously it's number one, it's AI, so you have to be mindful of like privacy and um just where this information is going. So if you're using like OpenAI, just be mindful of where that information is being copied to or like scraped into the web. And just be maybe add a note in your consent form about doing that as well. We add like in the note section that we use AI software so people are aware. Um, and yeah, anyways, so every transcript, this is an example of Redux AI, which is a kind of a software that we're using recently, somewhat new. It's for us, but we're like learning about it, and it's very helpful in terms of like doing translations and transliteration of Arabic. So depending on the language you're interviewing people, I would say select the software that way. So there's one, there's some that do like different languages better than others. But for our purposes, the Redux is pretty good. Yeah, this is an example of one of the interviews that I've done recently, and obviously, you have the good thing about it is that you're seeing the transcript along with the audio on the side, like together, right? So you're able to listen to it and read it at the same time, and that's very helpful. And you can pause and make your edits that way. And yeah, then it's saved into like a large transcript, and then we put it into like Word and continue editing that way because of the grammar and such. Be mindful not to over edit, like not overcorrect people, or if there are words or like sentences that said were like you think like, oh, this is not good grammar, or like this could be said a different way. Just like hold that urge, of overcorrecting and make sure you're presenting the person as they are authentically. And so also every transcript that we do using a software like this, we go through like at least multiple, like just 3 times just to like make sure that we're making all the necessary edits and authenticating what is being said. And it just really avoids the misunderstandings or like misrepresentation of certain words and sentences in there, which can be problematic. But we also acknowledge that we can't have it be 100%, accurate, 100%, like grammatically sound. So we also put a note on top of every transcript, urging people to refer back to the audio recording or the video recording to make sure that they're getting the information from the person themselves. But yeah, transcripts can be very useful. So like in terms of preservation purposes, it's another way of preserving this content. And it's also used by many researchers. It's much quicker to go through than to actually listen to like 2-hour interview, right? So we definitely recommend doing one for every interview. And we do have one on our website for every interview we've done.
Yeah, so just it's not really I can't really like go into detail. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is just kind of an example of what editing might look like on an iMovie software. You can see that you can add, we don't really add all those fancy schmancy fades in there or titles or things like that. We might just put, like the name of the person, maybe their occupation, meaning their job title, or maybe the data was taken. If we're also talking in it, we might put that in there as well. And then Lydia, you can actually go to the next one and I can also explain that one. This is just kind of an example of an audio enhancer, which is Adobe. This is just used for like, say that there's like some kind of, um, like discrepancies in how the audio sounds, or it's like, say they sound really far away. You can strengthen and enhance the speech to where it sounds like they're sitting right in front of you just for editing sake.
And this also does video, which is actually
Yeah.
incredible. So if you're having like a Zoom recording or like a video recording, you can just drop it in there and this will like literally get rid of all the noises in the background and really reduce any disruptions. So it really does. If you have the chance and if you want to subscribe to this because it's not free, but it is a very useful tool. But yeah, it really does enhance it to as it sounds like someone is sitting in front of like a mic and just speaking into that. Obviously, there's some feedback about doing that. A lot of oral historians don't recommend removing all background noise and like disruptions because it does take away from like the environment the interview took place in. One example, one oral historian was talking about during the conference I attended recently was about doing oral histories in a garden. And so during like they were just outside and they would hear like the birds like chirping and making noises. And so it's like really cute and authentic to the interview and it adds so much to the like what was happening and the time of day it was. So yeah, so there was just like, do we enhance it or do we keep the nature sounds in the background? And like what's a happy medium, right? And it really comes back to the oral historian, the person interviewing, to decide on that. And I would say like listening to birds and nature, it could be a good thing. So it does add context and it adds like value to the interview and gives you more information on the environment it was done in. So definitely use your judgment when enhancing interviews. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. That's kind of our little presentation about doing oral histories and kind of the tips that we recommend for people doing their own oral history projects. And definitely, like we come from a museum perspective, so we definitely understand that this is not going to apply to everyone. But we hope that you can take away some aspects of this that you can apply for your own family and your own interviews. But yeah, thank you again. And